If I could learn Spanish all over again, starting from scratch, one of the first things that I would focus on is vocabulary. I think focusing on vocabulary would be extremely helpful for me right off the bat because I want to have a good foundation of this Spanish language. As well, my main goal would be to become fluent in Spanish, and I would want to be conversationally fluent. And that requires quite a bit of vocabulary, if you can imagine. I also want to focus on specific vocabulary from different topics. For example, I want to be focusing on vocabulary that is about body parts, rooms in your home, food items, colors, weather, numbers, emotions, time, clothes, and materials like cotton, silk, brick, stone, granite, and also professions. And the main reason why I would want to focus on this type of vocabulary is because I've heard all these different topics in conversations that I've had in Spanish with many native Spanish speakers. As well, I don't want to be lazy like I was when I first started to learn Spanish, and I just did not want to focus on these type of topics. For example, I didn't even know what forearm was until last year in Spanish, which is antebrazo. Now that I think of it, I don't even know how to say granite in Spanish, I don't know how to say sleet in Spanish, and I don't know how to even say hail in Spanish. And these would come up in a conversation. Focusing on these desired topics would also help me to not be super overwhelmed because now I have focus, right? So I'm not going to be studying every single topic that exists. On top of that, for even more structure, what I would do is focus on a particular topic for a few weeks or how many ever weeks that I would need to actually memorize all the vocabulary in that particular topic. At the same time, I know that there's only so much that I could force. So let's say that I have 20 words that I'm studying within the weather topic, and let's say I can only remember 15 or 16, then I might go on to the next topic. Now, when it actually comes to remembering this vocabulary, there are many different things that I could do. So one thing that I used to like doing a lot is using sticky notes. I know that helps me out a lot to remember vocabulary because I'll put sticky notes around my home, right? And then I'll be able to remember the vocabulary, at least in my mind. I'll be able to remember a lot easier because I can see the word, but then it's also attached, for example, to my light. So I see the physical light and then I also see the word. So it helps me to remember it a little bit easier. And then I would use a flashcard app like Anki, and probably I would be using Duolingo and Memrise as well because I like those two applications. But yes, if I were to use Duolingo and Memrise, it would expose me to more topics. Consuming content in Spanish would help me to remember this vocabulary a lot easier, as well learning the pronunciation of Spanish words. Now that begs the question, how would I learn Spanish pronunciation? And I would accomplish this goal by using ITALKI. And the main reason why I would use ITALKI, so an ITALKI tutor or an ITALKI teacher, is because pronunciation is one of those things that's fairly challenging to do on my own, I would say. For example, I don't want to just watch YouTube videos about pronunciation, which I would, but I think having a tutor to actually teach me, a few times a week or a few times a month would give me a lot more knowledge about how to pronounce the letters and words and phrases a lot faster. And I would be able to practice my pronunciation with this tutor or teacher as well, so I could get some practice speaking right away. Also, I want to connect this to my main goal of becoming conversationally fluent. And I think being able to pronounce words correctly is quite important when it comes to speaking Spanish with native Spanish speakers, so I can be understood. And if you have seen some of my older videos of when I used to speak Spanish a few years ago, my pronunciation wasn't the best. And that's also because I didn't learn how to speak Spanish properly, like in school, for example. But I had to learn it all on my own. So I developed many bad pronunciation habits, and over the past few years, I've been trying to eliminate them. But if I were to start with a tutor, in my eyes, or at least in my opinion, I think this would limit those bad pronunciation mistakes right from the beginning. Also, with this ITALKI tutor or a teacher, I would be having them explain to me the basic rules of Spanish grammar, just so I can have a good foundation of that. And I won't be actually focusing too much on studying grammar throughout this journey because I know just studying grammar and trying to memorize rules just only confuses me even more. I've learned that over the past few years as well. So the main way that I actually would be learning Spanish grammar is through consuming content in Spanish and not dedicating hours upon hours to reading a Spanish grammar book. So what exactly does consuming content in Spanish mean? So to me, I see consuming content in Spanish as reading books in Spanish or reading news articles in Spanish, reading comments online in Spanish, or reading even the text messages of my Spanish-speaking friends, as well watching movies and TV shows in Spanish, listening to the radio in Spanish, listening to music in Spanish, as well listening to podcasts in Spanish. By consuming all this content in Spanish, I will be increasing all of my language skills. So I will be increasing my writing skills, my speaking skills, my listening skills, and my reading skills. Did I already say that? Reading, writing, listening, and speaking. There we go. Consuming content in Spanish is also going to help me greatly with remembering vocabulary, because now I'm going to be seeing the vocabulary in context. So I'm going to be seeing them more in sentences, and I'm also going to be hearing the vocabulary as well. And I can tell you that listening to vocabulary and also reading vocabulary is a great combination, and it really boosts your memory. So the flashcard and the language applications and the sticky notes are just a starting point for trying to remember the vocabulary. When it comes to watching movies and TV shows in Spanish and also reading in Spanish, I really need to make sure that I'm being very careful of how I'm actually consuming this content. So whether I am listening actively or passively, or if I'm reading intensively versus extensively, or if I'm listening to incomprehensive or comprehensive content in Spanish. I think using all these methods can help me to learn Spanish all over again. It just depends what I'm working on. For example, I could be listening to music passively just so I can get my ears adjusted to how Spanish sounds, and I won't be taking any notes. I'm not really paying attention to the words. Or I could be listening to the song more actively. I could be reading off lyrics and actually trying to memorize the lyrics and actually trying to understand everything that is going on in that song. Even if I can't understand everything, I still like to put on Spanish in the background, so at least I'm doing something. I can say that I was studying and learning Spanish that day. I must speak with native Spanish speakers throughout this journey as well, and right from the beginning. And of course, this may sound a little strange because in the beginning, I'm not going to know that much vocabulary. I'm not really going to know how to pronounce words properly, but I still want to be a part of conversations, even if I can only contribute a little bit. And it doesn't have to be a very long conversation. It could be, 10 seconds long if I don't really know that much vocabulary. I could just be like, hola, ¿cómo estás? Y hasta luego. So, just very simple sentences, very little vocabulary, but at least, I have a very simple conversation in Spanish right off the bat. And the same thing when it comes to having conversations and not being able to understand everything, that is still very helpful. So for me, if I couldn't understand everything that a native Spanish speaker was saying to me, then that would make me very insecure, and I wouldn't like that. But now, after learning Spanish over the past few years, even that is very helpful because, again, I'm still listening to how they are speaking Spanish. Even if I can't understand exactly what they're saying, that is still very important to me because I'm getting accustomed to the actual sound. Again, how it sounds and not just what is being said. So that has a lot to do with focusing on how the rhythm of Spanish is when it is spoken and the intonation and things like that. Because again, that's going to help me be able to express myself a lot better because I know that, okay, this Spanish speaker, they're not speaking with a very monotone voice. Now, another thing that I won't be doing is using too many resources because I know that when I was using too many resources, it really overwhelmed me and I didn't really know where to start. I didn't know where or what to study because I was trying to study everything. I would have so many different pages of websites up and trying to watch a video, trying to study a little bit of Spanish grammar. It was just way too much. I also won't be counting how many hours that I'm studying Spanish because I know that there is no really specific amount of hours that I need to really get to this goal or to reach my goal of being able to speak fluently. I really don't want to burn out again and chase numbers. As well, I know now that learning Spanish and becoming fluent is not the end goal because as a Spanish learner that is fluent, I'm still learning a lot more about the Spanish language. So learning Spanish is a lifelong process. I also want to journal my progress a lot more. So I want to know how I was feeling, what I was struggling with week after week. I know I do have some videos about that, but I want to be able to write those so I can have more detail. It would just be so cool to see how much I progress over the years. I would also do my very best to face my fears and deal with my insecurities from the beginning, because I know those things prevented me from a lot of moments of learning Spanish. For example, having fear of speaking Spanish made me not want to have any conversations in Spanish. And there are many times where I actually avoided having conversations in Spanish, or I would cut the conversation short because I had so much insecurity. And on a similar note, there is no way that I was going to sit in a conversation that I was hearing in Spanish, with Spanish speakers, and not understand everything and be comfortable with that. I didn't like that at all. Not understanding everything that a native Spanish speaker was saying in a conversation, to me, meant that I was a failure and that I wasn't really increasing my listening comprehension skills. But that was not the reality. I really don't want to go through all that again. So that is my master plan for how I would learn Spanish if I could start all over again. Now, let me know in the comment section below, how would you learn Spanish if you could start all over again? I can't wait to read these comments. And don't forget to subscribe. Hasta luego.